I had the hardest time naming this talk because I was like, okay, how about let's talk politics with friends? My husband was like, no, that is a terrible idea. No, everybody knows not to do that. Sorry, guys. Today, I'm going to test the limits of our friendship, and I'm going to break the don't talk politics with friends rule. Thank you in advance for your forgiveness. Okay, so by show of hands, how many of you know someone or love someone who, when it comes to political issues, the two of you just don't see eye to eye? Yeah, we all know that feeling. Maybe you just can't understand that meme they shared, or you have no idea how they voted for that person that they voted for. Or maybe you just can't wrap your head around how they could possibly think what you think they think about any certain political issue, or most likely all of them. It's terrible, isn't it? It's horrible. Sometimes I just wish I could live in a place where I could be surrounded by people who think the same things I think and support the same things I support, and we would just have no conflict whatsoever. I mean, can you imagine living in a place where you're just surrounded by people just like you? Actually, it's terrifying. Maybe part of being in a democracy, or maybe even the point of a democracy, is that we're all free to form our own perspectives, from our own knowledge and from our own experiences. And then we're free to express our perspectives as individuals, and we're able to engage in lively conversations where we can expand our thinking and refine our ideas and come to solutions. But dang, how's that going? There were the red Starbucks cups. There was the NFL boycott, the boycott to the boycott. There's the migrant caravan and the wall and the travel ban. There's Russia and Benghazi and arguments about fake news and Fox News and CNN and baby it's cold outside and don't forget the emails. I mean, it is a political minefield out there, an absolute minefield. Side effects may include constant arguments with family, loss of friends, loss of ability to attend family gatherings or speak freely at them. Perhaps you'll experience depression, anxiety, divorce, trouble speaking, telling people just move to another country already, saying maybe I will move to another country already, even though we all know you don't mean it, and what you really mean is that you're going to sequester yourself from society. You don't need them anyways. Stay home and binge on Netflix. It's great. Ask your doctor if polarizing issue animosity is right for you. It is exhausting being human these days. It's like landmines that lie between the bunkers of our ideological camps. These issues that are dividing us are keeping those of us who hold opposing perspectives and solutions to these problems apart. And it isn't just these issues that are the problem, it's our response to these issues that are posing a threat to the future of our nation, to our relationships to each other, and to our own well-being. It's not an exaggeration to say that this political warfare is killing us. Over the last 20 years, as rates of partisan animosity have grown, rates of loneliness have doubled from 20 to 40%. And the scary thing about loneliness is it isn't just sad, it's deadly. Loneliness correlates more highly with increased morbidity and early mortality rates than excessive drinking or smoking or obesity, which means that even if I am totally right and my friends are completely wrong, if I choose to cut myself off from them, I'm bound to lead a shorter and sicker life. So the fact is, we need relationships in order to thrive. And the kicker is, as much as we shy away from differing perspectives within our relationship, it's differing perspectives that are the birthplace for the things that we most need in order to have a satisfying life. We feel the most accepted when we feel loved in spite of our differences. And we experience the most opportunities for growth when our relational partners expose us to new and different ideas. So learning to dance with differing opinions within our relationship is a critical part of living a fulfilling and happy and long and healthy life. However, doing that dance is hard and it's risky business. And as national spat after national spat ensued, and I found myself getting in heated debates with friends and arguments with strangers on, online. I sort of realized I was doing that dance with all the grace of Elaine on Seinfeld. As a communication researcher, I was like, girl, get a hold of yourself. I mean, the reason I research communication is because I believe to my core that communication done right is the glue that brings us together. And communication gone awry is the thing that rips us apart. So I started to wonder if maybe there was a more productive way to engage in these conversations. My Uncle Myron was like, your Aunt Marion could really use some tips. My Aunt Marion was like, tell Myron everything you learn. So for myself and for all the Myrons and all the Marions out there, I decided to investigate the uncommon idea that maybe we can engage in conversations that allow us to come together over the issues that are ripping us apart. My research partner and I interviewed all kinds of people from all kinds of political persuasions who had conversations with their spouses or their siblings, their friends, or all too often, their ex-friends about hot-button issues where the two didn't see eye to eye. A lot of people told us that by following the advice not to talk politics with friends, they'd actually created relational distance. Because when you can't talk to people about things that are important to you, to people who are important to you, it feels disingenuous, and it doesn't feel authentic, and it ruins connection. But other people told us that they'd engaged in these conversations, and it had been an absolute catastrophic train wreck with irreparable results. So many people are no longer speaking to people that they've known and loved their whole life over political fallout. Still, other people told us they loved having these conversations. They told us that they grew from them and they learned from them, and then not only were they still friends, but they were better friends for having had these conversations. So from the stories of the good, the bad, and the ugly, we sort of discovered a blueprint about what to do and what not to do in these sticky wicket conversations. The most glaring takeaway for me was that I had been doing it all wrong. So this changed my whole approach, and I'm excited to share it with you. The first stark contrast between the conversations that went well and those that went sideways was the conversationalist's intent. Unlike those who found these conversations to be relationship TNT, those who engaged and came out still speaking were able to have these conversations with no intention of persuading the other, proving the other wrong, or winning the argument. In fact, they said it wasn't an argument at all. It was only a conversation. They did not debate issues, they just discussed them. They had no goal of changing opinions and also no goal of agreeing. Their only goal was to increase understanding. On the other hand, people who engaged in these conversations with the goal of changing opinions, proving they were right, or coming to some sort of understanding, they blew it. A lot of them are no longer talking to each other. One woman told us about a Christmas Eve that was memorable for all the wrong reasons. She started crying as she told us that as soon as her daughter and her boyfriend sat down for dinner, they got into it. She said it was so bad. Insults were being hurled, neither listening to the other. There was no goal of increasing understanding. It was simply a goal of winning the argument. She said they would do anything at any cost to win the argument. She added that the cost was their relationship. Unfortunately, when we enter into these discussions with the goal of winning the debate, we only put ourselves in a position to lose the relationship. The next trait of successful conversationalists is that they value different opinions. They're just intellectually curious people, and they like exploring things from different angles. They said, I'd be so bored if all my friends thought the same thing that I thought. They said things like, why hang out with people who think exactly like I do? That doesn't expand my thinking at all. They said when we just stay in our own spiral staircases, we never grow and we never move forward. On the other hand, people who don't think of other perspectives as interesting as much as wrong, as well as people who engaged in conversations with these folks, reported conversations that would have been so much better off just not happening. Of course, we all think our own opinion is right. That's why we have it. But thinking our opinion is right and thinking our opinion is superior are very different things. Self-righteousness, moral outrage, and being offended are they're like a shiny poisonous apple. It's so tricky because they're so delicious and they're so immediately satisfying and they're so easy to succumb to in the moment. But like a poison apple, in the end, when you're in these conversations, they just leave you alone and dead in the woods. They make it so you can't hear each other, you can't connect, and you can't move forward. Of course, sometimes anger can elicit action, which can inspire change. But when we're angry and we're offended and we just let it fester within us, it eats us from the inside out. And spewing anger, it's like taking shots when you're 40. Maybe it seems like a good idea at the time, but nobody feels good the next day. Speaking of really bad ideas and poisonous apples, political rants online are a really bad idea. We didn't talk to anybody who experienced relational fallout when they posted their own position on an issue, or they shared data that supported their position. But we talked to so many people who are no longer speaking after someone posted something that insulted people who didn't share their opinion. Unfortunately, so many people said that they wished quitting Facebook before irreparable damage is done. They said, what they read, they could never really come back from that. And now that they knew that their friend felt that way about people who think that way, they just couldn't look at their friend the same way anymore. So if your friend leans right, and you would not call him an ignorant imbecile to his face, then maybe don't post that, or generalizations that blast Republicans on your Facebook. Conversely, if your nephew leans left, and you wouldn't say to him to his face, you're an elitist snowflake, then don't post snowflake memes on your Facebook. Unfortunately, whether we intend it or not, when we post generalizations that blast a group of people that someone we love is a part of, we blast the person we love, whether you meant to or not. And the unfortunate thing about that is not only does it ruin relationships, but it's totally ineffective. As they say at the Nantucket Project, you just cannot insult somebody into agreement. So it's just a lose-lose to engage in that. Another common denominator of conversations that went well is that the conversational partners gave each other agency, or the ability to come up with their own opinion and define it themselves. In doing this, they often found that the negative stereotypes they held about people who held an opposing perspective were defied. Not everyone falls into the diametrically opposed and overly simplified talking points that surround every single issue. Not every single person on the right sits at home in their red hat, drinking Bud Light, clutching their AK-47, watching Hannity. And not everyone on the left sits at home, drinking Merlot, wearing their pink hat, not belong to Rachel Maddow. And the other thing is, speaking of Maddow and Hannity, people who were able to talk about people and people groups, people who did that, had terrible outcomes. It's much better if you just stick to positions and issues. And the reason why is because when somebody maligns somebody that you identify with, you take it personally. And when you align somebody with someone they don't align with, that's also personal. My little cousin used to say, I'm the boss of me. So in conversations like this, it's important to let people be the boss of themselves, define their own positions, and that leads to more productive understandings. Probably the most important thing people who are successful in these conversations do is they take the long view. They prioritize the person and the relationship over the person's position on any issue. They consciously decided being kind is so much more important to them than being right, and that no opinion is worth losing the friendship over. JB said, I love my work mentor. We have to recognize that having different opinions doesn't make somebody our enemy. Somebody said, I'm not going to fight with someone I know over someone I don't know. He said, Donald Trump probably isn't going to be at my funeral, but my niece will be. Other people, unfortunately, said that they didn't have their priorities right. Mary was just a lovely lady, and she was in tears. She's had a best friend for 40 years. 40 years, talking every day, all the time. One of them posted something on Facebook, and things unraveled. And she said, she's such a great person, but I made her feel like a bad person because of her political opinions. And she's a great person, and I miss her so much. An important part of prioritizing the person over the person's position on any issue is engaging in shared experiences. Be in a book club, go to the movies, get out there and do the things you love with these people because it reminds you of why you're friends. Shared experiences, particularly shared joy, leads to shared humanity. John Gottman is a relationship expert, and he says that for every one interaction that's conflict or kind of negative within the most successful relationships, there are 5 positive interactions, which means if you're on the chairlift and you're discussing a polarizing issue on one ride, the next 5 rides need to be about things like, what are you going to wear to the Emma's House mom prom? And have you heard about that Hamilton, Montana witches ride? And have you seen that new Bronx stadium? And how about that awesome TEDx event? It's really important that we have difficult conversations, but it's also really important that they're not the basis of our relationships. Finally, even between the most deft, divergent perspective conversationalists, things can get heated. And these people know how to quickly diffuse, de-escalate, and jettison before the damage is done. Across the board, the agree to disagree platitude kind of falls flat. It leaves communicators feeling disjointed and separate. However, people who are able to throw out a universal statement like, ultimately, we both want the same thing. We both want kids to be safe in schools. We both want our economy to thrive. We both want our country to be successful. Or, I love your passion. I love that there are people who care just as much about this as I do. I love that we can still be friends but have such different opinions. Or even, I love you, are able to totally reframe the conversation. They're able to take themselves from a binary orientation where they're each standing in their own circles back to an inclusive circle where they're back together. And from there, they quickly pivot to a shared experience. Something like, let's ski. When are we going to golf again? Did you see The Bachelor last night? Yeah. These are the kind of things that establish continued goodwill and allow the relationship to keep moving forward. Ultimately, we're all on the same plane, and we all wanted to fly. 16th century poet Rumi said, out, beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. Perhaps by using these strategies, we can find our way to that field, and we can find our way to greater understanding, to possible solutions, and most importantly, to each other. Let's give it a shot. I'll meet you there. Thanks.